Epilogue Part 1. Conversations with Dad. More experiences from the converted funeral home. Epilogue Part 1. Conversations with my dad. The 8th month of 2010. First day of hospice care. I'm visiting my father. The doctors have said without any more treatments he has 3 months. Stage 4 cancer riddled throughout his body. My father made the hard choices so he wouldn't have to. He's refusing treatment and signed a DNR because the tumors are in all major organs and inoperable. This larger-than-life man in my younger years who stood 6 feet tall and pushed 375 for most of my childhood was now gaunt and about 110 pounds. When I was a kid, he could easily hoist me into the air with one arm. Now he was able to lift him with one arm, or I was able to. I bring my daughter over to visit as often as I can. She knows Grandpa's sick. They watch Thomas the Tank Engine together, and my father watches even without her to keep up with the plot twists. One afternoon, my daughter went down for a nap after playing with Grandpa and watching Thomas. It was then that my father decided to show me a Ghost Hunter series he started recording on TiVo. We watch a couple of episodes, and then he decides it's time to talk. Our conversation went like this. Dad: not like your old apartment, huh? Me: no, nothing like that. Dad: too bad these paranormal groups weren't around then. Be no dude run. That would have scared the pimples off their ass. We just had those two from Connecticut, Ed and Rose. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yeah, those two, yeah. They do assemblies when I was in school. Only ones I wouldn't ditch on. So you know it was an old funeral parlor, right? What was? Our old apartment? Oh yeah, the basement was the embalming room. Uncle's floor was for viewings, and our floor was the funeral director's living space. That closet of yours was the lift to get the bodies up and down. You never worked that one out? No, kind of explains a lot. Oh yeah, creepy shit started happening weeks after we moved in. Minor stuff. Windows opening, doors banging. But when he got older, he started talking to an old man who wasn't there. What the? Go through the picture albums you got from Mom. I think there's a few we took of you with the white mist in the background or around you. Ugh, thought that was cigarette smoke. Nope. We were too poor to move. My parents couldn't take us, and, or your mom's mother. Well, as for me, I would rather naked wrestle a horny porcupine and swim the pool of Purell than live with that woman. Thanks for the visual, Dad. You're welcome. So the apartment was all we had. You used to talk about the adventure the old man said you would have and the treasure you would find in the cave. I don't recall that. You were just a little shit then. Now you're a big shit, so shut up and listen. The cave was your name for that area under the stairwell in the basement. You know the one. I hated that room. Yeah, that's because that was the first time you ever saw the shadow. What was Uncle Jay's word for it? Demon. It's old Gaelic for demon. Yeah, Uncle Jay enjoyed teaching you the old language. But anyway, from that point on, it was like head under the blankets, monster in the closet. You stopped talking to the old man and thought he wanted to hurt you. You're creeping me out now. Well, it did get worse. The treasure you spoke of was the safe that was built into the foundation. Uncle Jay did some checking into the background with the funeral guy. Not a good man. 5th generation asshat businessman, and a convicted con man to boot. He was known for slipping valuables into the safe from the deceased. His partner, incidentally, was the one who set up a room in the attic and got the pool table up there. Notified the authorities when he learned of it. What did Uncle Jay, or when, or why did he buy this place? Bought it dirt cheap. Our Uncle Jay never believed this stuff till after we moved in, and the activity increased. Anyway, after things started happening, Uncle Jay just went to the basement when he stashed a trunk of odds and ends that he found in the house, and in the trunk was a set of old ledgers where the last entry in it was. I'm done that rat bastard turned me in. Family legacy gone to shit. May the devil take him and everybody that comes to this house after us. That night, according to Uncle Jay, both the director and the partner vanished. House went to some nephew who renovated it. Sat on the market for a while, and Aunt and Uncle snapped it up cheap. When Aunt G's friend heard it was a funeral home, she was all gung-ho to have those communication parties, bringing in those Miss Chloe psychics. Got to the point where Uncle Jay had a priest come bless the house. Things quieted down for a while. Then the break-in. The doors and thresholds were damaged. The blessing was vacated, and it came back seething mad. Go on. You mean you never wondered why we had your grandmother come get you from school instead of coming home? Why we all worked all those weekends and you stayed at your grandparents'? It wasn't until you were older where it was just feasible to have your grandparents watch you after school. That's when you really started to notice things. No, Dad never worked it out. Just thought you were saving money in that. What did it look like to you? To me, it was like shrouded had 3 eyes, hands like hawk talons. Big. 3 eyes, long horns pointed toward clawed hands. Darker than dark around it. After that night in the storm we were leaving, come hell or high water. Got lucky, got the cash for the payment, got out. Your mom had a priest bless the house. Grandfather kind of just carved and buried the 4 stones. You know, I would see that damn bull shadow in the trees outside our property sometimes. First night we saw it together, and then it took Uncle Jay. You know that, right? I believe it took him from us. Saw it again the night you moved out, over the nights leading up to your mom passing. The day we put down the dog, and now I see it like it wants me to know that it's waiting for me. My dad's meds kick in, and it was lights out on the Painkiller Express. Epilogue Part 2. Conversations with my cousin. More experiences from the converted funeral home. Epilogue Part 2. Conversation with my cousin. 9th month of 2010. The last time I saw my extended family was at my father's memorial. Or, if you will, an Irish funeral. I sent off booze, food, stories, and accomplishments of the deceased. Part memorial, part comedy roast. There you have it. It's there I reconnect with my cousins. Let's jump forward several months. 3rd month of 2011. Have you ever felt like your past was on a collision course with your present, and while you're waiting for a thunderous boom as the two meet, instead of a single electronic ringing of a cell phone that heralds the reunion, phone rings, I see the contact info. Hello? Hey, it's cousin number 1. Listen, I wanted to ask you something, but you know it wasn't right last time we all meet. What's up? So my brother and I inherited the old place you used to live at. Eesh. You have had weird things happen, and now you want to know if I've ever experienced anything like it while I was living there. Dude, yeah. Yep. Everything from noises to smells, banging doors, cabinets opening and closing, toys turning on, lights flickering, temperature differences. My dad and I even saw it once. Really? Yep. There's something dark there. Now, before I go any further, let me get some paper. Okay. Now, are you aware of the house's history? Cousin, I'm going to put you on speakerphone so my brother can join in. How's it going? Not bad, so you guys know the house was a funeral home. No. Yeah, Dad told me, owned by a real crook, stole from the deceased. At this point, I tell them everything I know about the house's past. Stunned silence. Everyone said we shouldn't live there and just sell it, but we thought it would be good to keep it in the family. I've got the first floor, brother's got the second. My girlfriend and her kid are with me on the second. If you got your kid in the back, at least the backmost bedroom, that used to be my room, and if I were you, I would change it. That closet. It uses that closet. It tormented me for years with that damn closet. Yeah, we found it open several mornings in a row, and sometimes at night I can hear my kid talking. I asked him if this morning who he talks to, and he said the old man that lives in the closet. We switched rooms, but it's still opening, and it's like being watched all the time. My father told me I saw an old man when I was a kid. He was trying to get me to go to the basement. Yeah, nope, we don't keep anything in the basement, not after the movers got hurt. What happened? We hired some guys to move everything out of the attic and the basement. Attic was fine, but guys had a hell of a time in the basement. One guy fell down the stairs, and one guy trying to get that safe moved had fallen on his leg. That crew quit over the basement, so we hired another crew, and dude, one guy lost 2 fingers trying to move that safe. He swears something bit them off. It's the only thing remaining in the basement. Yeah, this creeped me out just as much typing it as it did hearing it the first time. Some friends and family wanted some of the things in the house. Anyone that took anything returned it within a week, said it made the house feel creepy. Has anyone seen it? Seen what? I explained the entity as I remembered it. And how I remembered it was different than what I had in my journal, and I'd forgotten my father saw it slightly different than I did. No way. Yep. Look. It seems to build and then does something really frightening. Then takes time to savor the chaos it created. Then it starts up again. Honestly, don't screw around with it. It can seriously screw with you. Like you guys ever get into stupid fights, get so angry for no reason? So that's what this thing feeds off of. Yeah, we do. How do we stop it? I don't think you can. But Dad said Uncle Jay had some luck with an Irish priest, but it was always short-lived. It seems to be bound to the house, and no items in the house. When we moved, we left a bunch of stuff just to make sure. Okay, we'll try that. Good luck, guys. Epilogue Part 3. Conversations with my cousin. More experiences from the converted funeral home. Epilogue Part 3. Conversations with my cousins. 11th month of 2011. Cousin 1 calls me and tells me that they have moved out, and why. I'm obviously on speakerphone. Here's how this conversation goes. Man, we really screwed up. We had to move. We're going to put that place up and never look back. What happened? My brother had a priest from his church visit. They blessed each room of the house, upstairs and downstairs. They said that they would need to do this a few times. After about a month, the house grew calm, and we thought that it was over. It really was like a new place. I take it something changed. Yeah, man, I really screwed up. After our Halloween party, see, my brother and I threw a party. Drinking was involved, and we had gotten a good buzz, and have been talking about the odd stuff going on. Well, we thought it was finally gone. Torment is more likely. You're right, it was really dumb to think it was gone. Anyway, one of our guests, and this was a guy that we let in the weird things going on, and right from the start, we wanted to try the Ouija board. We told him no constantly, but he would always bring it up. Goes to his car and brings it out. Yep, a Ouija board, and says, let's find out. Please tell me you didn't use that thing, not in that house. I was buzzed. My brother had left the party, but 3 others stayed, and somehow we ended up sitting around this board, lights off, candles burning, asking questions and drinking. So using the board, we asked, is there anyone who will speak with us? No. No one will speak with us? Yes. What's your name? No response. Were you alive once? No. What are you? We are. What are you doing here tonight? Waiting. What are you waiting for? Blood. At that, a glass on the table tipped over and shattered. We jumped up and a few of the candles went out and we continued. Did you do that? Yes. Are you going to show us more? No. Are you trying to harm us? No response. What do you want? Kill. Have you killed before? Yes. What did people do to you? Called. When were you called? 1908. Why were you called? Revenge. Revenge on who? Thief. Doors began banging in the house. The sound woke me up and my girlfriend and I swapped bedrooms with her kid. The room felt uncomfortable and cold, and I know I heard something in the closet. We heard the banging, but we continued. Is that you again? We're here. When did you come to this house? 1925. Why stay in this house? Sorrow. The mourners woke you? Hunger. Will you ever leave? Never. What if we call the priest again? No response. What if we have a psychic come in? Mad. What if we force you to leave? We're here. The table felt like it lifted, so everybody stood up from the table. Somebody hit the lights and they came on. We could see blood and glass on the planchette. We all had got cuts from the glass on our fingers. Just then the door stopped slamming, the planchette on the board, untouched by anyone, covered in our blood, moves to go say goodbye. That's when it all came on, growling and banging from the door in the living room and head downs to the basement. The light seemed to dim and it looked like shadows were crawling out and wiggling from under the door. We started shouting. I thought you were pulling up like our chain a bit, but I turned on all the lights on the second floor. And I tried to rush downstairs, but had to stop. Stuff was coming out of the door to the basement. It was starting moving up the stairs. It was ice cold if you stepped on it. I raced back upstairs and got my girlfriend. It had started to come out from under our bedroom closet like a black fog. We ran and got her kid, turned to leave, and that's when we saw it standing in the kitchen. My kid said, "Look, it's the old man." But what was in the kitchen was not an old man. It was huge, big head, long arms, ended in clawed hands, and just as black as I've ever seen. I got my keys and we ran. We ran outside, got in the car, and we were gone. Then it appeared downstairs. My friends bolted as it hurled the planchette at us. We ran from the house. What I remembered next was that both outside doors slamming shut at the same time. So everyone's unharmed? Yeah. Did it ever follow you after you left? No, not when we moved, or when I moved out on my own. Yeah, we're done with it. Good call. Take nothing from the house that came with it. That's what we did. The house was sold as a flipper a few months after. My research shows that they had to sit on the house and ended up losing it to the bank. It was then sold to the current owner. Notes from 2020 original post. I understand that my cousins are providing me this information, but I believe them. The detail they both provided was far too similar to my own experience. Some parts of it I didn't tell them about. I'm also not surprised that using the Ouija board provoked it. This would be the last time that I spoke with my cousins about the house. They are alive and well and want nothing more to do with the house or even talk about it anymore. My experiences do not end here. I recently got in contact with the current owner. Continued activity in the converted funeral home, Part 1. Present day, my initial contact. I reached out via snail mail to the current owners of the house. Hello, this will likely be the most bizarre note you will receive. When I was a kid, I grew up on the second floor of this house. I've included a printout of the layout of the second floor. The house was once a funeral home, and I'm writing because I've been sharing my experiences with strangers, and it's really awoken like a sense of responsibility about this house. I'll be blunt. This house has a dark entity in it. I know this will sound crazy, but I've seen it. I lived in terror of it for years. I was terrorized by it, physically assaulted, and I believe it went as far as to oppress my family. The basement is unnerving. Have any children started to have an imaginary friend called the Old Man? Here's an email address where you can respond if you want. Please forgive the lack of identification or return address, but I've learned to be wary of anything physically coming from the house. A few days later, the email address gets a hit. Current owners. You're not crazy, we've seen it too. Your letter arrived, and I admit my partner and I were very skeptical, but you captured the layout of the upper floor just perfectly. It's odd that we actually took comfort from knowing that we're not going crazy. We moved in about 8 or 9 months ago. The house was undervalued for its size, so we thought that we got a good deal. Being non-essential workers, we're both quarantined at home, and it feels like something is drawing on the fear and uncertainty. My partner believes she has a gift, and the night after we closed on the house, she couldn't sleep. She said we made a mistake and that something was waiting for us in the new house. I was always a skeptic about the paranormal, but lately I'm thinking there's more to this world. We moved in, and on the first day the home stunk of rotten eggs, and it would go away and return. When not smelling like eggs, it was like compost. It was so strange. Our cat will hiss and growl in the middle of the night, and we'll find her gaze-locked on the door to the basement on some random corner. We hear the footsteps on the second floor, but no one's renting the apartment. We called the police once, convinced somebody was up there. They heard the steps and started an investigation. The doors and windows were locked. No one was up there. One day we saw a figure a good 7 feet tall taking up the whole window frame of what was your bedroom window as I was gardening. It appeared to be watching us. My partner tried to get a picture of it on her phone, but the file corrupted. You mentioned an old man, and I had a long pause right there. My partner and I don't have any, but we do have a nephew. He's been going on now about the old man that talks to him in his playroom. The room is the one directly under your old bedroom. My partner studied Reiki and is trying to push positive energy into the home to force out the negative, but so far has had no luck. Ghost of the Mount Washington Hotel, White Mountains, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. I absolutely love this old hotel, and any chance I can, I head to it. But the interesting thing about this hotel is it's haunted. The most active room of the hotel is room 314. It's referred to as the Princess Room. This is the room that the hotel's founder's wife, Carolyn, would stay in. Her original canopy bed is in the room. That being said, you don't need to stay in that room to experience activity. My wife and I stayed in the hotel for our 15th anniversary last year, and the story we got to take away is the one I'm about to share. We stayed in one of the hotel corner vista rooms, phenomenal views, but they're located at the end of a long hallway. My wife and I go to dinner in the main dining hall, and they set up a table for Carolyn with the original china and silverware every night. I took a photo of the table and went and had dinner. As we finish and leave, my wife notices the knife and fork are on the plate. We mentioned it to the hostess, who immediately tells the manager next to her that she did see the silverware move. My dumbass forgot to get a picture of the silverware position post-dinner. After going to the Speakeasy Club for a few drinks, we start to return to our room. But in the hallway, half down, the floor is like a huge white mist. Its form becomes somewhat more human-like as I fumble for to drop my phone. It tilts what would be its head to us and then vanishes into the room. The room is 314. We go to the main desk to speak with one of the people, and they call the manager. The manager listens, writes a few things down, and says that we're a third party that evening to report seeing Carolyn in the hall. The hotel has a small book of all the images of Carolyn that have been captured over the years, and you can request to view it during your visit. There's never been malevolent reports of encounters with her, but she has been seen many times, and the wait list to get this room is very long. When I was in kindergarten, my friend and I saw a green hand coming from underneath the bed we were sitting on. It was feeling the bed sheets and the pillow. I'm 25 years old now, and I still remember this event pretty distinctly. At the time of when this event occurred, I was living in Aurora, Ohio, near Cleveland. I had one younger brother who was not present for whatever reason. The time of which this event occurred was probably either after school or during the middle of the day on a weekend. I don't remember. I do, however, remember that it was broad daylight. My brother and I shared a room with the bunk bed in which the bottom bunk was perpendicular to the top bunk. It was allowing the sort of a cubby space underneath the top bunk. There was a small area of space, I'd say about 1 foot in width, between the back of the lower bed and the wall it was near. My friend from class and I were sitting at the foot of the lower bed at the opposite end. It was away from the underneath portion of the bunk bed near the wall. We were playing with Pokemon cards. This was in like 2001 or 2002, so Pokemon was all the rage at this point for the young kids. This was around the time period that Game Boy Advance was released. Everything was normal. We were having a conversation as we were messing around with the cards. Then all of a sudden, at the back of the bed, caught the corner of my eye. Naturally, I turned to look and see what it was. As I looked to my left, the seemingly normal conversation I was having with my friend abruptly and ominously came to a halt, and both of us stared in bewilderment in complete silence for I'd say a good 3 seconds. It was very quick. When I turned, I saw a green hand which had come up from the back space behind the bed. I was feeling the pillow and the bed in the area where my brother would put his head to sleep. Like I said, the whole thing lasted, I'd say, maybe 3 seconds. Then the hand vanished. I don't remember if it went back behind the bed or if it just dissipated. It happened very quickly. As soon as the hand disappeared, I broke the ominous silence. Asked my friend sitting next to me, "Did you see that?" He replied, "The hand?" confirming that we had both seen the same phenomenon. I ran across the house and told my mother what we had just seen. She quickly brushed it off and told me it was nothing. I went back to the same room and continued playing with my friend. I wouldn't say that my friend and I were particularly scared by the event, though it was definitely very strange. I never told my little brother about it, who slept in the lower bunk bed. To this day, I remember this event distinctly, and I've looked online and have found other events that were similar to this event described on the internet. Other people claimed to have seen green hands in their house. Has anyone else heard of this before? A nighttime visitor. This is an experience that happened with my friend who was sleeping over at my house. We had a finished basement that was dubbed the second living room. It was our hangout with an old couch, a chair, and all of our gaming consoles. My friend slept in the basement. That's when she would spend the night, and I was in my room upstairs and always told her that she was more than welcome to sleep in my room, or at least the actual living room. She always declined because of how hot it got upstairs. She told me that she was laying down on the couch, having kind of a hard time falling asleep, and she was on her side with her back, was out to the room. She was feeling okay for a bit, but suddenly felt like someone was in the room with her. She turned around to see if it was me or my sister, but didn't see anything. She turned back around and just kind of laid there for a bit longer. Suddenly, she heard a man's voice start talking. She flipped around and saw a figure sitting on the chair on the other side of the room. She stares at it for a second, trying to get a good look at it. She realizes that it doesn't really have any features. It's just the shape of a person sitting in the chair. Soon it actually speaks to her. According to her, it asked her what she was doing, or how. Asked how he's doing in like a typical Southern girl kind of an accent. They carry on a conversation full of your typical small talk. Towards the end of the conversation, the figure asks, "Did I frighten you?" She answered honestly and told her that she was startled because he kind of popped out of nowhere. He stood up and moved toward the stairwell and said, "Good," before walking up the stairs. At this point, she loses it. She calls me and yells that I need to get down there as soon as possible. I'm thinking she hurt herself or something, so I'm down there in about 30 seconds. She's crying and telling me that something in the basement was with her. I thought she meant that someone had broken in through one of the windows that was down there. We lived on a hill, and that one wall was above ground. I looked at the window and see that it's perfectly fine. I start to ask her what she means by it. She tells me about the figure and it talking to her. I asked her why she made me come downstairs instead of coming up, and she said she was just paralyzed after hearing it say "good." She was so scared by this that she wouldn't go upstairs, and that was until I brought down her dog to walk her back up. This is the same dog in my doorknob story, and her thought process was that he would protect her. Parker was more than happy to come down, so she took that to mean that it was safe to go. She decides she wants to sleep on my floor and have Parker in there, just in case. After that, she didn't sleep over again. I can't really blame her for that. A loose doorknob. This experience is one I share with my sister. The beginnings of it are a bit hazy, I'll admit. For whatever reason, I was sleeping in my sister's room. I think we may have watched a scary movie and I was too chicken to sleep on my own, but needless to say, I don't remember why I was in there, but that's where the story takes place. We're sitting on her bed around 1 a.m. We had a dog that slept in my sister's room at the time, so he was there too. Parker, the dog, had fallen asleep, so we were trying not to wake him up. He's loud when he's rowdy. So we're just playing on our phones, showing each other videos, and cracking jokes. The usual. We had to be quiet because both parents were in bed and it was a weeknight. I think we were on the same school break. I'm not 100% sure though. After a while of nothing interesting happening, Parker shoots his head up. My sister and I are both caught off guard. We stop what we're doing and listen to see what woke him up. We don't hear anything in the hall, and we turn our attention back to our phones. Parker is still staring at the door a few minutes after we stop paying attention. My sister tries to get his attention so we would lay back down and go to sleep. She has no luck getting Parker to even acknowledge that she's there, let alone responding to his name or pets. After a few more minutes of him staring the door down and my sister trying to get his attention, something happens. The doorknob was a bit loose in the door. Years of kids grabbing and pulling will do that to a doorknob. But it looked and sounded like somebody was on the other side of the door wiggling the knob up and down extremely fast. Parker hears and sees this and goes nuts. He jumps off the bed, gets between the door and the bed that we're sitting on at this point, and he just is snapping and snarling in a way that we've never, ever heard from him before. It was honestly terrifying. My sister and I were completely frozen. We didn't know what to do. Parker was showing all the signs of a dog in full-on aggression mode. His ears were back, his hackles were raised, and it looked like he was trembling. I thought at the time that maybe he was so angry he was shaking, but looking back, I honestly think he was trembling out of fear. Of course, because it was 1 a.m. on a weeknight, it took my parents about maybe 3 seconds to get out of bed and come storming into the room. My dad throws open the door and starts yelling at everybody. He thought that we got Parker started. He soon realizes that my sister and I are crying, and Parker peacefully laying down on the floor and was watching my dad. My mom comes in and asks why we got Parker started and why we were crying so hard. We told her that we didn't do anything. Parker heard the doorknob being wiggled around and jumped up and went nuts. Of course, my dad is your typical non-believer and said that we must have had a dream and scared Parker when we woke up. We knew there was no point in arguing with him. He's never believed us when we told him, that kind of weird shit in our house. My mom was a bit more reassuring and laid back for us. Nothing else happened after my parents came in the room, though. A few tales about my neighborhood. Growing up in my childhood home, my friends and I spent a lot of time in the ditch between my neighbor's house and mine. We would do a whole bunch of things, like crawling through the drainage pipes. Only when it was sunny, of course. We would play in the ditch while it rained, and it was super fun when the water built up. We did some other forms of tomfoolery, too. One day I was hanging out in the ditch with a couple of my friends when we heard this whistling. We all got quiet for a moment and listened very hard. It was getting closer and closer while we all looked around, panicked, trying to figure out if it was someone messing with us. We all get out of the ditch looking around everywhere and didn't see anyone. Soon it sounded like the whistling was coming from behind us. We booked it to my house. We all took a few minutes to settle down and was still looking around to see if it was someone's older sibling being a jerk. But we never did see anyone. We all discussed how scared we were and how it felt like the hairs on the back of our necks stood up the closer the whistling got. We never saw anything and we never heard the approach of anyone that might have been whistling. Once my mom and I were taking a walk around the neighborhood to get out of the house for a little bit. We were a couple of streets away from our street and walking next to the local park. It was midsummer in the middle of Georgia, so the temperature was about 95 degrees. I don't know why I agreed to walk. I hate sweating. We were just chatting about different things when both of us got silent as we walked through an ice-cold spot. It was 2 seconds at the most, but the change in temperature was very jarring. We get through the spot, walk in silence a bit further down the road, break the silence first, and asked if she felt the icy spot back there. She looked at me and nodded her head and said she also felt like we were being watched. We weren't supposed to go through that spot. The mood had drastically changed. We decided to end the walk early and go home. Lastly, a bunch of friends and I were sitting in the neighborhood park. And being your typical obnoxious middle schoolers. We were sitting around the picnic table area and we were laughing and joking. My younger sister was there and I happened to be best friends with somebody with the same name. So we're all laughing and joking together when suddenly, a few of us hear something calling my sister or my friend's name. We aren't sure who it was directed to. Those of us who heard it the first quickly told the others to be quiet and to listen. We heard it again and more clearly because everybody was quiet now. It was very unsettling. The way the name was said, especially. None of us could tell the gender of the voice or pinpoint where exactly it was coming from. It kept saying the name over and over, getting more drowned out each time it was said. There were a few other kids and parents at the park and the play area, so we figured it was one of them calling their kid. However, we were all watching them, and they were on the other side of the park, which means they would have had to be yelling for us to hear them. This voice that the name was saying, it wasn't yelling. It was just speaking it. After that, we decided to go our separate ways. We didn't go back to the park for a while. A demon or a ghost? I was around 12 years old and sitting on the back of my dad's truck with the tailgate down. I was waiting on my friend to meet up with me. That way we could go do whatever 12-year-olds do on a weekend. That was my dog's ears. It was a spring day in Georgia, so everything was alive and very noisy. Dogs were barking, flapping their ears, and birds were chirping. Bugs were screaming. After sitting there for a while, everything goes silent. There wasn't a peep. I look around to see if there were any birds or dogs around me, and there wasn't. When I turned back to look at the street, there was a black, misty, shapeless form walking from my neighbors. It was across the street from me, walking from their yard to the neighbor's yard. As I'm watching it move, I whispered in disbelief, "What the hell is that?" Apparently it heard me because it stopped as soon as I said it and looked like it was turning toward me. Although it was shapeless, it was thinner while moving and kind of thickened out like a normal person would when you look at them head on. It stood there for what felt like an eternity and I'm guessing stared me down. My heart was beating very fast and I don't think I was even breathing. It started to move toward me and was about to step into the street when I heard my friend yell to me from up the street. The way the houses were built, she couldn't really see the side of the street with him. I snap my head from her, raise my hand so she knows I'm there, and immediately go back to look at the form, and it wasn't there anymore. Once I saw that it was gone, everything came back to life. All the noise expected at springtime hit me at once, and I became extremely overwhelmed and started to cry. My friend reached me and saw that I was crying, and she was rightfully confused and asked why I was upset. I told her everything that I'd experienced, and she got quiet. She told me she saw it not too long before I did at her house. She lived a street over, and told me that she was terrified during the encounter. She said it started to move towards her from her neighbor's yard, like me, into hers, and she was completely frozen. She broke out of that trance because her mom told her she needed to come inside for dinner. Because we were so spooked by that, we decided it was a good day to have a movie marathon. I never saw it again, but I do believe I had other encounters with it. So, was it a ghost or was it a demon? My encounter with the black dog of Hanging Hills. In Meriden, Connecticut, about 40 minutes outside of where I live, there exists a range of mountainous trap rock ridges called Hanging Hills. The easiest way to get to them is to park in a wooded mountainous park called Hubbard Park. Take a trail that starts with a slightly intimidating passenger bridge that crosses over the highway. I'm afraid of heights, but always try to challenge myself by going hiking and putting myself in slightly uncomfortable situations, to overcome my fears. In the spring of 2014, my wife, or girlfriend at the time, we decided to take our umpteenth hike up Hanging Hills to see Castle Craig. It's a stone tower that stood at the end of the main trail and overlooked the cliffs. The city of Meriden in Quinnipiac Valley, and for the umpteenth time, we launched into a discussion on the drive there about the legend of the black dog. I find ghost stories that have any shred of historical reality to them intriguing. Well, I guess you could just say mostly because the representations of ghosts on TV or YouTube these days involve people becoming easily scared by shaking or noises in abandoned locations. The legend of the black dog is an exception. That's because it involves the legend itself and the story of two geologists from the late 1800s. They apparently encountered it and actually documented it. The legend has that you see the black dog of Hanging Hills, once for joy, twice for sorrow, and 3 times for death. There are plenty of legends of black dogs in folklore, which sort of tell a similar tale. The 2 geologists, W.H.C. Pynchon and Herbert Marshall, they were conducting research of the area in the winter of 1891 when they encountered the black dog. According to the story, Pynchon had seen it once. Herbert had seen it twice before. Herbert didn't believe in the legend. After ascending the hills again alone, Hubert supposedly fell to his death. I remembered the image of the black dog from W.H.C. Pynchon's story, which clearly every time we hiked up the mountain. This time was no different. That particular day, my girlfriend and I encountered a hiker on the trail that was letting his black dog without a collar roam loose. We weren't sure whether it was to mess with people or not. The dog wasn't little like the one depicted in Pynchon's story. Rather, it was bigger, like a lab terrier mix, and friendly too. It came up to us and started panting at our legs. "Sorry about that," the hiker said as he caught up to the dog and us. "Not at all. I bet you love having a little bit of legend with you around here." "Oh yeah, the ghost dog," the hiker said, forcing a laugh and grimacing as he had heard that one too many times. As he walked away, my girlfriend made a comment about my obsession with the stupid dog and not wanting to hear about it. We made our way to Castle Craig about 20 minutes later. Unlike the trails off the highway, the main trail from the park is not long or difficult other than a large hill at the end of it. We took pictures at the top of the tower and by the cliffside, and not really thinking anything more about the black dog. We had made so many trips up to the tower and seen so many hikers with black dogs that the legend almost seemed like a joke at this point. "Want to take the main trail down or the road?" I asked as we finished up taking pictures and drinking whatever water or Gatorade we had left in our packs. "The road," she insisted. "We can see that river." The road leading up to Castle Craig is typically taken by cars and bikers. We sometimes hike down it to catch a glimpse of the Quinnipiac River on the way back to the park. Despite it being a warm April day, there were very few cars or bikers on the way down. It was nice and quiet. About a quarter of a mile into our walk, my girlfriend tugged me on the shoulder and pointed to a figure on the side of the road between some shrubbery. It stood about 10 feet ahead of us. "The hell is that?" she said. I took a step toward. She tugged on my shirt and shook her head. "Is that what—" I nodded. All I could do was nod. The figure was small and resembled a black dog with floppy ears and a hot dog tail, much like the one in Pynchon's illustration. I wouldn't have thought that much of it if not for the fact that the figure was blurry. It wasn't the distance between us that made it blurry, and there weren't any fog-related conditions that day. It was almost as if Mother Nature had taken the dog in a Photoshop program and used the blur effect on it. Even when I took a step closer, to my girlfriend's hesitance, it still looked blurry. We were frozen otherwise, though. I didn't think to take a picture of the figure. There was an unknowing understanding between us that we shouldn't approach and just wait for it to cross. As the figure crossed the road, it didn't look at us. It just dawdled with its nose to the ground. For the rest of the hike, we were silent. We both knew what we saw, but couldn't put it into words. It was only after a while that I said I should have taken a picture, but deep down, I felt it was a good thing that I didn't. Seeing the figure wasn't frightening, but it wasn't pleasant either. We've been back to the Hanging Hills many times since, and we never encountered any luck or sorrow. Just a memory of a little blurry black dog and an understanding that, well, when you see an actual paranormal entity with somebody else and understand what it is, there isn't really a question about it. I've read many stories posted online since about the black dog. Few have described what we saw. Black dogs run loose in the park all the time, and a number of encounters we read about seem like fabrications. The peach tree. For most of my life, my grandparents lived in a small town on the border of Maine and New Hampshire. To really even get in the house, you had to travel through several back roads that were not lit by any streetlights. They built the house from the ground up in the early 90s with the help of family members and a small construction crew. It was an idealistic brick and wood style house with 3 bedrooms, a half-finished basement, and a porch that was sealed off from the rest of the house. Growing up, my brother and I used to spend at least 1 week a summer alone at that house. My grandparents weren't the warm type, but they would take us hiking and bring us to the beach and let us roam the property on our own. My grandparents' house had what seemed like endless woods surrounding it, miles of tall grass that separated their property from their neighbor's house. When my brother was 11 and I was 8, we went exploring one afternoon in an attempt to find that neighbor's house. My grandparents were off gardening and didn't care so much about where they went, so as long as we were home for dinner. That's the way it was with the 7 boys they raised, and they didn't feel it would be any different from their grandkids. As we made our way through the tall grass, we cut ourselves on the blades, and I was bit by a gardener snake. We were unfazed because, well, unless we were seriously injured, my grandparents paid no mind and had the boys will be boys attitude. But the grass so tall, it was tough to know how far we were from either house. Eventually, we stumbled upon a patch of dead grass and a peach tree. It seemed odd to find a peach tree in the middle of nowhere, but we were excited and started picking peaches off the tree. We sat atop the branches, burying our faces in the juiciest peaches. Nothing like what our mom bought us from the grocery store, but after a few minutes, we saw a figure standing underneath it. It was an African-American woman in a rose-pink embroidered dress. She looked middle-aged and tired. A moment later, we noticed a young boy and a girl about our age standing behind her. The boy was wearing overalls and a white t-shirt, and the girl was wearing a sundress. Their outfits looked unusual, but we didn't question them. We just stared as though, well, this woman was just smiling. "Go ahead and eat the peaches," she said, smiling. We just stared blankly at her. "It's okay." We smiled, said thanks, and grabbed a few peaches to take with us. "You two look tired. Where do you live?" "We're at our grandparents' house over there." She nodded, but never told us where they lived. My brother had spotted another snake in the grass, darted after it. The 2 kids laughed and watched as he wrangled the snake and slung it over his shoulder as he was like Indiana Jones. I tried to catch another nearby snake, but fell flat on my face. By the time I got up off the ground, the woman and her children were gone. When we went back to my grandparents' house, we told them about finding a peach tree and coming across her neighbors and kids. She was only half paying attention, though, and made some sort of comment about how it was nice kids are still playing outside. About 20 years later, when my grandparents had sold the house and moved to a mobile home in New Hampshire, I asked her if she remembered her African-American neighbors that lived next door. This gave her pause as she struggled to remember. "There was a French woman who lived there," she told me, "but not African-American." "Maybe she had friends over." "Nope," she said, confused. "She lived alone and hardly anyone visited her." I started to think that I had dreamt the event because it had happened so long ago. That's when I recently asked my brother. He thought it was interesting that I never brought it up after all this time. He had thought he might have dreamt it too. He remembered the family and remembered the peach tree, but a couple summers later when we went up to my grandparents' house alone, he tried to retrace our steps, but couldn't find any peach tree. He only saw the old French woman that lived there for many years, and I struggled to think of a logical explanation for the event. I even tried my best to research the property that we had searched for. It turns out, like my grandparents, the French woman had her house built on the property. Before then, the property had just been woods, one long flowing field of tall grass. I also discovered that peach trees don't grow in Maine. The type of clothing I remember the woman and her children wearing were most popular in the 1930s. There were no record of the property before the 60s, though when the French woman had built her house. Threatening entity / possible possession. I'll start off with explaining my family and living situation. My wife and I have 3 children. Her daughter who is 7, my son who is 9, and her son who is 10. We don't have any children together. My wife and I share a bedroom. Her daughter has her own room and our boys share a room with a bunk bed. Her son sleeps on the bottom bunk and my son sleeps on the top bunk. There's all 3 of us, full-time, and visit the other parents every weekend. My son has always had some behavioral issues that stemmed from us living with my parents for some time and things that they allowed him to get away with when they were watching him. I feel as if I'm also to blame for some of his issues because I'm not a super loving, affectionate person. I believe that every child needs that from their parents. When my wife and I first started dating, my son got along great with her 2 children aside from some jealousy and selfishness traits that come from being an only child. But as the relationship progressed, the 2 boys started butting heads a bit more. For the past few weeks, my son's been calling my stepson an idiot multiple times a day. He gets in trouble for doing this, and when asked why, he chose to call names. He says he doesn't know and just tears up like he's confused. He's also been staring and glaring at my wife with a blank expression that makes her feel extremely uncomfortable. He's also lunged at her a few times in a threatening manner. My son has never done these things before, and it just seems like it started to happen out of nowhere. We have him in counseling and we're working to resolve these issues. Before I get into explaining the events that we experienced last night, I want to explain the one previous experience we had in our bedroom. My wife and I were laying in bed one night. I was asleep and she was awake. She started nudging me, which woke me up, told me that she was seeing a shadow figure in the corner of our bedroom. I looked and didn't see it at first, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see it as well. It was a dark, translucent figure that stood maybe 5.5, 6 feet tall. It was just standing in the corner of our bedroom. We stared at it for maybe 2, maybe 3 minutes, and it started to fade away until it disappeared completely. Neither of us felt threatened or unsafe, but we were definitely creeped out. That was about 2 years ago. We haven't had anything else happen until last night. Fast forward to last night. We were playing a video game online, Call of Duty. I was with my sister, her boyfriend, and a couple of their friends. It was around 7:30 and I started to feel dizzy and nauseous, so I told her I was going to head to bed. She woke me up around 9:30 to smoke a cigarette with her, but I started to feel dizzy and nauseous again, so I headed back. Laid there for a while, unable to sleep, and started to get cold chills and goosebumps and had an uneasy feeling. My wife came to bed at around 11 and fell asleep pretty quickly, but I was still unable to sleep. I laid in bed for what I assume was about half an hour and started to hear thumping and tapping around our house. Some noises were in our bedroom and some sounded like they came from our kitchen, some from the kids' bedroom. I then heard what sounded like one of our kids walk down the hallway and into the hallway bathroom and slam the door. Thought that was odd because none of our kids slam doors and they usually don't wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I started to hear light talking, whispering almost. Then I heard a female voice say my name. "Do you want to go do that thing?" it said. Thought it was my wife asking me to go smoke, so I attempted to roll over and ask her why, but I was unable to move or talk. I started to think that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, which I've never had before, but I knew that I was definitely awake. I thought about some things I've read on Reddit and other places online about commanding spirits or entities to leave my home. Or leave me alone, at least. I was finally able to say, leave me alone, and when I did, I saw a light flash in her bedroom window and saw something drop from about shoulder height onto the floor, which made a loud thump sound. It reminded me of someone dropping a cell phone or a TV remote. I started to freak out, but was finally able to move, so I shook my wife's arm and woke her up. I had her turn on her phone light, and nothing was there. I got up and turned on her bedroom light and started looking for whatever it was. Nothing was there. Explained what happened to my wife, and she was obviously scared at this point. We laid in bed for a few minutes and started to hear thumping noises coming from the boys' room where all of our 3 children were sleeping. So I got up, turned their light on, and checked on them. But they were all asleep. I laid back in bed, and a few minutes later we heard something fall in the boys' bedroom again. I got up, turned the lights back on, and saw that a book had fallen off the top bunk onto the floor. But the book was open, face down on the floor. Think of it as an A with a spine facing up and the 4 edges of the book touching the floor. The book was about 2 feet away from his feet and the foot of his bed. So I didn't think that he would have been able to knock either of them off. Her 2 children woke up when I was about to leave the room and followed me to her bedroom. So we let them sleep on the floor. I must have fallen back asleep, but a few minutes later I awoke to my wife hyperventilating, and she said that she had looked in the same corner of our room, saw the figure again, but this time it was standing over her 2 children in the middle of the room. I looked, but I couldn't see it, and she said it had vanished again. We heard a few more thumps and thuds throughout them, but nothing really happened. My wife seems to think something may have attached to or possessed my son, taking his behavior into account, that is, and I'm scared for the safety of my son and my family in general. Our neighbor is a pastor of our local church, and I'm going to speak with him after work tonight to see if he's willing to come bless our home and see what his thoughts are. But at this time, we're scared to go back to our home because of what happened last night. Ex-death row wing. To give some background to working on G-Wing, or Golf Wing. G-Wing used to house death row inmates as they await their executions in the prison. It's set up similarly to other wings in the prison, except a little bit different. The wing is divided between 3 floors and 6 rows of 17 cells each row. We no longer house death row on the wing, and the first floor is the only floor with inmates housed in the cells. These inmates are open population inmates placed on disciplinary confinement. The second floor contains 5 supermax cells. The third cell down on the right side now is actually held Ted Bundy. It's a supermax cell. The rest of the cells on the second floor are empty and still have TV stands. The third floor is empty as well, with regular cells. Our quarter deck is a small 15 by 20-ish foot on the second floor, where we have a desk set up and a few chairs. Bathroom, break room with a fridge and a microwave. The quarter deck is where the officers chill at while in between rounds and activities. The staircase that goes to all 3 floors is directly to the right of the quarter deck, next to up front of the door wing. The wing is also generally dark. In the emptiness of the wing, keep in mind, this wing is meant to hold over 100 inmates and only holds about 30-ish inmates on the first floor. Give the wing a dead silent, foreboding feeling. Now that you understand the way the ex-death row wing is set up, I can go ahead with the stories. When I first started working in the prison, I was told by many COs that G-Wing is the easiest wing to work due to you only having to walk the 2 rows on the first floor, making your rounds quicker and easier. However, the trade-off is that the wing is fucking creepy, with long, dark, empty rows, flickering lights out of place noises, footsteps, doors opening on their own. This wing had it all, but everyone picked it because after all, it's the easiest wing to work. I finally worked G-Wing, the first time about a month ago. and I still remember the first time I've ever dealt with something just so unexplainable. I entered the wing at around 6 p.m.-ish and proceeded to do my first rounds, basically just making sure all the gates are locked, showers, closets, pipe chases, everything. After doing my round and everything was locked, and all my inmates were good, me and the other CO started shooting the shit. Around 9 p.m., the first weird thing happened that made us all question it, but not really freak out. We had the second floor pipe chase open on the quarterdeck, our smoke spot, and I and another unnamed CO were just burning up when we heard loud clangs above us on the third floor catwalk. Keep in mind, the only way for someone to go to the third floor catwalk in the pipe chase would be to have the house keys to unlock that pipe chase, which were on my hip. We brushed it off as a rat, kept smoking, and continued the shift. I'm unsure of the exact time this happened, but it was after 2 a.m. and before 5 a.m. Me and the other two COs were on the quarterdeck. We were just talking. That's when we were cut off by a loud and long creaking noise on the third floor. We all agreed that it sounded like the road gate being opened on the third, so we grabbed our flashlights and ran up the stairs, thinking that somehow an inmate from the first floor escaped, made it up to the third floor without us noticing. All of which was very improbable, but it was the only logical thing we could come up with. We arrived on the third floor and immediately began checking the row gates, which were locked. And so were all the closets and the cell doors. But we know we heard it, all three of us. And we're certain it was a door or a gate swinging open. We went back down the quarterdeck and quietly talked the rest of the night. My second experience actually happened recently when I was assigned to G-Wing again, and genuinely shook me worse than the last experience. We were hanging out on the quarterdeck when I decided to kind of fuck with Bundy. I grabbed my flashlight, walked down the side 2 row with the Supermax cells until I came up to the third cell. The lights were already on in all the cells. I looked inside the cell, just checking it out and building up my confidence before yelling, "Ted Bundy, you son of a bitch!" Right as the last word left my mouth and the cell light turned off and turned back on, I felt like I was freezing. I quickly ran back to the quarterdeck and told the others what happened, and I could tell they were each trying to figure out whether or not to believe me. Needless to say, I do not mess with Bundy anymore in that wing. Those are my 2 personal stories. But any CO that has worked that wing can tell you a thing or two. Even the inmates that are housed on that wing are terrified and always silent. I remember asking them why they're so quiet, to which one who had been in G for a while stated, "Because, sir, the police aren't the only ones that are walking down the row." And left it at that. Another inmate who used to be on death row and housed in Ted Bundy's old cell was hearing Ted in the cell along with other voices. Tried telling the wing sergeant that he had needed to be pulled out. The wing sergeant wouldn't pull him out, so this inmate cut up his arms and passed out from how much blood loss, and he almost died, just so he wouldn't be in that specific cell. Other COs and myself also talk about feeling a sense of dread when walking down the empty rows, which I have also felt and seen shadows move from their peripheral view. I'm 39 years old and I still don't know what happened that night. When I was 13 years old, I went down with my mother. Went to Tennessee to visit my family members on my stepdad's side of the family. That's where I met my cousin TJ. We became fast friends and I stayed over his house a few nights. Then it was time to go to Grandma's house for the night. TJ wanted to come and was invited. TJ and I slept in one room and my parents were in the next room. TJ and I stayed up late talking and being goofy kids. At some point I fell asleep. I was laying flat on my stomach in bed, and that's when I felt my legs being grabbed and shook. Half asleep, I said, "TJ, stop." It happened again. It wasn't TJ. The best way I could describe it was a boy with a shirt of fire. It looked like a fire, but it wasn't flickering or moving. He smiled at me, ran to the other bed next to mine where TJ was supposed to be sleeping. It ducked and dissipated into nothing. Seconds later, TJ walked into the room. He just came from the bathroom. He asked me what was up, and I said nothing. I must have looked like I just saw a ghost. Ran to the room my parents were in and raised my hand to knock on the door, but then thought for a second. What the hell was I going to tell them? So I just went back to the room and laid down. I didn't say anything to anyone. I think the only reason I got any sleep is because TJ was in bed next to me, so I didn't feel alone. But I didn't sleep easy. Years later, I did talk about it to my stepfather. He said that Grandma had a nephew that died in a fire. I'm getting goosebumps just writing this, and when I think of this too much, I still get goosebumps. Over the years, I ask myself, was it just a dream? But if so, why did it happen when TJ woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and what are the chances that this grandma didn't know all this? And that she had a nephew who died in a fire. I don't know what to believe, but nothing like this has ever happened again. I don't hear a lot of people that have had such a ghost experience. I can remember his face and everything. For years, I never liked sleeping on my stomach with my legs out of the blankets because of this. Either I had one hell of a dream, or this really happened. I didn't make this story up, and I know it's just a post on Reddit from some stranger, but something happened to me that night. I've told other people, and even tried, but I'm careful who I tell to. That's because I don't want people to think I'm crazy.